Jenny Millers was 29 years old, a waitress at Rosie's Diner, a modest place nestled between a hardware store and a laundromat in rural Kansas. Her life followed the same rhythm every day: rise before sunrise, walk 3 blocks to work, tie on her worn blue apron, and greet the morning regulars with a smile that never hinted at the solitude behind it. She lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment above the pharmacy, her only family captured in photos yellowed with age. Her father had died when she was 15, her mother 2 years after. The aunt who raised her had relocated to Arizona for her arthritis, leaving Jenny with little more than holiday phone calls and the occasional letter. It was a Tuesday in early October when Jenny first spotted the boy. He couldn't have been more than 10, small for his age, with observant eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. He always sat in the booth furthest from the entrance, a backpack far too big for him resting beside him, and a book always open in front of him. The first time he ordered, it was just a glass of water. Jenny served it with a smile and a paper straw. He gave her a nod of thanks so subtle it was almost invisible. The second day was the same. The third, the fourth. By the second week, Jenny had noticed his routine. He would arrive at 7:15, exactly 45 minutes before school started, at the elementary 3 blocks down. He would sit quietly, read, sip his water slowly, and observe as other patrons ordered pancakes, eggs, bacon, and toast. At 7:55, he would close his book, thank her, and leave never having eaten. On the 15th day, Jenny accidentally brought him a plate of pancakes. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, setting it down as though puzzled. "The kitchen made an extra. I'll just leave it here instead of tossing it out." The boy looked up, eyes torn between caution and hunger. "It's okay," Jenny assured him. "Sometimes the cook messes up the orders. Better to eat it than let it go to waste, right?" She walked away before he could argue, watching from behind the counter as he slowly picked up the fork. When she came back 10 minutes later, the plate was clean, and his eyes were glued to his book, an intentional avoidance that made her heart ache. "Thank you," he whispered as she cleared the plate. It turned into their silent tradition. Each morning, Jenny would bring the mistaken order or the extra. The cook had prepared pancakes one day, scrambled eggs and toast the next, oatmeal with brown sugar on cold mornings. The boy never asked for food, never started a conversation beyond a soft "thank you." But he finished every bite, sometimes so fast it seemed like he thought it might vanish. "Who's that kid you keep feeding?" Harold, a retired mailman who claimed the same stool every morning, asked one day. "Never seen his folks." "Don't know," Jenny replied, "but he's hungry." Kathy, who worked the grill, cornered Jenny in the back after the 3rd week. "You're feeding a stray," she said, not unkindly but with the practicality of someone who had seen good intentions blow up before. "You give handouts. They never learn to be thankful. He'll just vanish one day. They always do." Jenny didn't argue. She simply shrugged and replied, "It's fine. I used to be that hungry too." It was the most personal thing she'd ever shared with her coworkers in the 3 years she'd been at Rosie's. The boy never offered his name, and Jenny never asked. Something about the way he carried himself, the cautious way he entered and exited, how he positioned himself to see both the door and window, told her that questions would only push him away. So instead, she made sure his water glass stayed topped up, that the pancakes were always hot, and that the diner felt like a place where he could breathe a little easier for 40 minutes each morning. Sometimes when the diner was quiet and the boy was immersed in his book, Jenny let herself wonder, was he staying nearby? Did he have any family? Why was he always alone? Why did hunger seem like an old companion to him? But she pushed the questions aside. In her view, kindness with strings wasn't really kindness at all. So she maintained their unspoken routine, watching as the boy's shoulders slowly relaxed from their usual guarded hunch as his eyes began to meet hers for a moment longer each time she came by his table. That tiny change, that shift in eye contact from a flash to maybe a second, was enough to assure Jenny that whatever she was doing, however small it seemed, actually mattered. By the 6th week, others had taken note of Jenny's habit with the boy. Most stayed quiet, but some couldn't help making remarks, laced with the sharpness of those who've forgotten what needing help feels like. Playing social worker on the clock? Asked a businessman who came in regularly, his tone implying he found the situation distasteful. Kids these days think everything's free, another customer noted. Back in my day, nobody handed out food just because someone looked down. Jenny heard the comments, but let them slide off her like raindrops on a windshield. She'd learned long ago that defending compassion only made critics dig in harder. But Mark, the diner's manager, couldn't be so easily ignored. One morning, he called Jenny into the cramped office behind the kitchen, his face stern beneath his ever-sweaty brow. "I've been watching you with that kid," he said, fingers drumming on the cheap laminate desk. "We can't have staff giving out free meals. Bad for business, sets a precedent." Jenny twisted her apron in her hands. "I get it. I'll cover the cost myself." Mark's eyebrows lifted. "From your tips? Those barely cover your rent." "It's my decision," Jenny replied, something steady in her tone that made Mark take a longer look at her. "Just one meal a day. I can handle it." After a pause, Mark exhaled. "Fine. But if it affects your work or if that kid causes problems, it ends. Got it?" Jenny nodded, a wave of relief washing over her. She'd expected a reprimand, maybe even to get fired. But this compromise? She could live with that. Each morning, she set aside part of her tips, money that might have gone toward a winter coat or the dentist visit she kept putting off, and used it to pay for the boy's breakfast. On a bitterly cold Thursday in November, the boy didn't show. Jenny found herself glancing toward the door every few minutes, a tight unease settling in her chest. She made his usual pancake plate anyway, setting it at his regular booth just in case. "Wasting food," Kathy muttered as she walked past, shaking her head. By the end of the day, the untouched plate sat like a quiet accusation. Jenny boxed up the cold pancakes and took them home. She couldn't bring herself to throw them out. The boy didn't come the next day either, or the day after that. A whole week passed with no trace of him, and Jenny began to wonder if Kathy had been right. Had he just moved on, like strays often did? The thought left her with an empty ache she couldn't quite define. She hadn't known anything about him, not his name, not his past. Still, his absence felt important, like a small light had gone out. "Extinguished," Kathy said on the 10th day of his absence, not unkindly, but with the certainty of someone whose pessimism had once again proven correct. They never stick around once the freebies stop. During this time, Jenny noticed a customer snapping photos of the vacant booth where she still occasionally left a plate of food, just in case. The following day, she found out why. A local Facebook group had posted the images with a mocking caption, "Rosie's Diner, now serving pretend charity cases." The comments were even crueler. "Publicity stunt. Bet they claim the meals go to needy kids while tossing them out. Feeding strays just makes them dependent. That waitress needs a wake-up call. Next time a weird kid shows up, remember, you're part of a setup." Jenny had never thought of herself as especially sensitive to public opinion, but the harshness of the comments cut deep. That night, alone in her apartment, she questioned her actions for the first time. Had she been naive to help someone she knew nothing about? Was she just projecting her own history onto a situation she didn't fully understand? Seeking solace, she opened the small wooden box where she stored her most treasured belongings. Inside was a worn photograph of her father in his army medic uniform, his expression gentle despite the sun-bleached desert behind him. Beside it rested the small leather journal he'd carried through his deployments, the pages softened from years of handling. Jenny turned to a dog-eared page and read the familiar words. "Shared half a ration with a local kid today. Johnson said, I was nuts, that the boy might give away our position. Maybe. But the look in his eyes when he ate? Same as mine, when Mom saved me the last crust of bread back during the lean years. You don't get poor from splitting a meal, but forget how to give, and you'll starve inside forever." Jenny traced her fingers along her father's script, a sudden sense of clarity washing over her. She didn't need the boy's name or backstory to recognize hunger. And hunger, whether physical or emotional, asked for bread, not explanations. No one knew who he was. No one remembered the face of the person who'd helped. But each morning, someone wasn't hungry anymore. If you still believe that small kindnesses can change a life, please type hope. On the morning of his 23rd absence, Jenny arrived at the diner with few expectations. The habit of watching the door at 7:15 lingered, but the sharp anticipation had dulled into quiet acceptance. Still, she prepared a modest plate of pancakes and placed it in his usual spot just in case. At 9:17 a.m., everything changed. The first sign was the hush that swept through the typically busy diner. Jenny, refilling a coffee cup near the window, looked up to see 4 black SUVs with government plates pulling into the tiny parking lot. They moved with practiced precision, forming a semicircle in front of the entrance. Diners froze mid-sentence, forks suspended in air. Passers-by stopped to watch as uniformed men stepped from the vehicles, standing at attention. From the lead SUV emerged a man whose posture demanded attention even before his uniform confirmed it. Tall, with a sun-worn face etched by too many years of unrest, he wore the dress blues of a high-ranking military officer, his chest gleaming with rows of medals and ribbons. He studied the diner's sign before moving with purpose toward the entrance. 2 younger officers in step behind him. The bell above the door chimed, unusually loud in the heavy silence. Mark came out of the back office, tugging his tie with unease. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, voice a pitch too high. The older officer removed his cap. "I'm looking for someone who works here, a woman named Jenny." The diner grew so quiet that Jenny could hear the low hum of the fridge behind the counter. Every eye shifted to her as she stepped forward, still holding the coffee pot. "I'm Jenny," she said, trying to steady her voice despite the sudden dryness in her throat. The officer's stern features softened. "Jenny Millers?" She nodded, placing the pot down before her trembling hands gave her away. "My name is Colonel David Reeves, U.S. Army Special Forces Command." He reached into his jacket and produced an envelope, stiff and official. "I'm here because of a promise made to one of my men." He extended the envelope toward her. "This is a letter from the Commanding General of Special Operations, and I have a personal message from Adam's father." "Adam," Jenny echoed. The name rang strange, yet oddly important. "The boy you've been feeding these past few months," Colonel Reeves explained. "Adam Thompson. His father was Master Sergeant James Thompson, one of the finest soldiers I ever commanded." Was. The past tense hit Jenny like a blow. "I don't understand," she said, still not reaching for the letter. "Is Adam okay?" "He's safe," the colonel assured her. "He's with his grandparents now in Colorado. But for almost 3 months he came here every morning." Before school, after his father had been deployed on a classified mission, the pieces started falling into place for Jenny. The boy's loneliness, his cautious awareness, the hunger that seemed deeper than just physical. What Sergeant Thompson hadn't known, the colonel continued, was that his wife had left shortly after his deployment, abandoning Adam. The boy had been too proud, too scared of being taken away from his home, to tell anyone. He got by on his own, using the small emergency fund his father had left, stretching meals beyond belief. A soft gasp of disbelief spread through the diner. Jenny's heart tightened as she pictured Adam now with a name, a background, trying to survive alone, waiting for a father who'd never return. "Sergeant Thompson was killed in Afghanistan 2 months ago," Colonel Reeves said, his tone official but still emotional. In his final letter, he wrote that if anything happened to him, we should thank the woman at the diner named Jenny, the one who fed Adam without asking anything. He opened the envelope, pulling out a handwritten letter on worn paper. He wrote, "If I don't make it home, please find the woman who kept giving my son breakfast. Adam told me about her in his letters. He said she never questioned why he was alone or made him feel ashamed. She just fed him, day after day, without expecting a thing. Tell her she didn't just feed a hungry kid. She preserved the honor of a soldier's son." Jenny took the letter with shaking hands, tears clouding her sight. The colonel's voice felt distant as he went on. "That letter was read during Sergeant Thompson's memorial. When Adam finally shared your name, the entire Special Forces unit made it our duty to locate you and thank you personally. What you did," his voice faltered slightly, "what you did for the child of one of our own, without knowing who he was, that means everything to us." The diner had gone completely still, Even those who'd once mocked Jenny's choices sat unmoving, their faces revealing shock and, in some cases, regret. Colonel Reeves stood tall, came to attention, and gave a formal salute, a rare and powerful sign of respect for a civilian. Behind him, every uniformed service member present followed suit. On behalf of the United States Army Special Forces, the brothers-in-arms of Master Sergeant Thompson, and above all, on behalf of Adam, thank you. Jenny stood frozen, overwhelmed by the realization that her simple acts of compassion, pancakes and eggs, a glass of milk, a wordless smile had meant the world to a boy facing unthinkable trials. To a father at war, his final battles were fought far from home. "I didn't know," she finally whispered, her voice scarcely audible. "I just couldn't let him go without food." The colonel nodded. "Sometimes that's all it takes, Miss Millers. Sometimes offering a meal to a hungry child without asking why they're hungry is the greatest compassion there is." As if on cue, every service member inside the room and those waiting by the vehicles outside raised a synchronized salute. The customers in the diner, moved by the moment playing out before them, quietly stood in respect. Jenny, the unassuming waitress who had lived in the background for years, now stood at the heart of it all, holding a father's final thank you in her hands. A woman whose consistent daily kindness had safeguarded not just a boy's survival, but a soldier's pride and peace during his last days. The week following the colonel's visit brought changes to Rosie's diner that no one could have foreseen. Word of the story swept through town like wildfire, from hushed conversations to social media to the local press. The same Facebook group that had once mocked Jenny's charity case now shared a heartfelt version of Master Sergeant Thompson's letter, drawing thousands of shares and warm comments. Regulars started asking specifically for Jenny's section. They left generous tips along with thank you notes. "You reminded us what truly counts," and "My son's in the Navy, your kindness gives me hope." Mark Yorway, who had initially resented Jenny's free pancakes, hung a small American flag beside the booth where Adam once sat. Beneath it, he placed a subtle plaque, "Reserved for those who serve and those who wait." That booth was never empty again, regularly filled by veterans, active duty members passing through, or families in need, all treated with quiet respect by the staff. On the 7th day after the colonel's visit, a manila envelope arrived addressed to Jenny. Inside was a handwritten letter on a lined notebook paper, the neat script betraying the youth of its author. "Dear Miss Jenny, I didn't know your name until the day the colonel came looking for you, but every morning during those months, you were the only one who looked at me like I wasn't broken or invisible. Dad used to say real heroes don't wear capes, they wear uniforms, but I think sometimes they wear aprons too. When Dad stopped writing, I thought the world had forgotten us. But you remembered me even when I couldn't say why I was always alone. Grandma and Grandpa are kind. They're teaching me how to fish, and Grandma bakes great cookies. But I still miss Dad. And sometimes, I miss your pancakes too. Thank you for not asking questions I couldn't answer. Your friend, Adam Thompson. P.S. I finished the book I was reading. It had a happy ending after all." Jenny framed the letter and hung it behind the counter. Not in a spotlight, not for attention, but as a personal reminder of why small kindnesses count. When patrons asked about it, she would smile and say, "Just a thank you note from a very special customer." News of the diner's link to special forces spread through military circles. Soldiers passing through often made detours to visit, leaving behind unit patches or challenge coins as tokens of gratitude. These mementos found a home on a small bulletin board behind the counter, a growing collage of appreciation from around the globe. 3 months after the colonel's visit, a group of school children came to the diner for lunch after a field trip. An 8-year-old girl, her eyes wide with curiosity, studied Jenny as she topped off water glasses. "My dad says you're a hero," the girl announced matter-of-factly. "Do you feel like one?" Jenny smiled and crouched to meet the girl's gaze. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who remembers what it feels like to be hungry and not just for food." The girl's teacher, who had overheard, added softly, "That kind of hunger comes in more than one form." Jenny looked up and met the teacher's knowing expression with a nod. She was right. Hunger wears many faces and food is only the most visible one. As summer neared, the diner held a fundraiser for military families, collecting enough to create a small emergency fund for children of deployed service members. Surprisingly, Mark matched the donations himself, later admitting that Jenny's quiet perseverance had stirred something within him. "Never understood why my dad insisted on feeding every stray kid in the neighborhood," he said. "Used to drive my mom nuts. But now, I think I get it. Sometimes a meal's more than just food." Then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, almost exactly 1 year after Adam had first come into the diner, Jenny arrived for her shift to find something small and metallic on her. A challenge coin, usually a distinctive token carried by service members and typically awarded only within their ranks, rested next to her order pad. One side displayed the Special Forces emblem. The other was custom engraved with the words Semper Memor, always remembering. Jenny glanced around the empty diner, scanning for whoever might have left it. Finding no one, she stepped outside, surveying the street as a light morning breeze stirred the American flag above the entrance. There were no unfamiliar vehicles parked nearby, no couriers waiting, just the town slowly waking up, sprinklers ticking across lawns and the distant sound of the school bus beginning its early route. She tucked the coin into her pocket, its weight a quiet comfort, a reminder that gestures of goodwill, offered without expectation, often return in unforeseen ways. Later that evening, as she removed her apron before heading out, Jenny spotted Mark putting up a new sign in the diner's window. It was plain but thoughtful. It read, "Whoever you are, whatever you can pay, no one leaves hungry." When he noticed her watching, he gave a slightly awkward shrug. New policy. Felt like the right time. Jenny gave a knowing smile, recognizing the silent affirmation in his action. No big speeches, no dramatic announcements, just a steady promise to acknowledge need and meet it the best way possible. Food without judgment, compassion without conditions. As she walked home in the dimming light, the coin still nestled in her pocket, Jenny thought about Adam. Now living with his grandparents in Colorado, growing up with his father's legacy. Maybe, she hoped, also growing with the knowledge that even in the darkest chapters, kindness has a way of showing up where you least expect. Not everyone who helps seeks recognition. Some simply want to make sure that, at least for today, someone isn't hungry. And that alone can transform a life. You may forget this story within a few days, but if no one chooses to pass it along, history stays silent. Subscribe to Incredible Stories, where memory, compassion, and justice are honored till the very end. The young waitress gently slid the plate of pancakes toward the boy, whispering, "Same as always, sweetie," on the house. She never asked his name, never expected anything in return. But that morning, the entire neighborhood stopped as 4 polished black SUVs pulled up in front of the diner. A man in full military dress stepped out, holding a neatly folded letter in his hand. Who were they? And why did everyone stop to watch?